On my sister's wedding day, with 200 guests watching, she took the microphone, smiled at the room, and said, "This is my sister, still living with our mom, still hasn't found anyone. And she's gotten pretty big, as you can all see." My mom, standing right beside her, let out a little laugh and added loud enough for everyone to hear, "If anyone's brave enough to take her home tonight, just let us know." The whole table burst out laughing, and I sat there, in the emerald green dress I had bought 2 months earlier with so much effort, in chair number 8 at the table of distant relatives, because that was the spot my sister had reserved for me at her own wedding, wanting to turn to dust, wanting the polished marble floor of that reception hall in Buckhead to simply swallow me whole and spare me the rest of the night. But the floor didn't open, and I kept sitting there, with 200 pairs of eyes aimed in my direction. What happened next is what I came here to tell you, because no one in that ballroom on that Saturday night in August expected what was coming, not even me. Let me tell you something before I go any further. I am not the kind of person who holds grudges. I am the kind of person who holds memory, and there is an enormous difference between the two. Grudges corrode, memory organizes, and it was exactly my memory that, 18 months after that night, changed everything. But what I need you to understand, before anything else, is that that comment into the microphone was not a joke. It was not a slip. It was not my sister being unfiltered on the most emotional day of her life. It was rehearsed. It was planned. And I only found out much later, in the most brutal way possible. When I found out, something inside me that still needed to protect itself stopped needing to. And when you stop needing to protect yourself, you become free to build. If you've ever felt like your own family was the most dangerous place for your body to exist, subscribe to this channel and hit the bell. Tell me in the comments, has someone in your own family ever humiliated you in public and you stayed silent? How did you feel afterward? I want to read every single response. To understand the comeback, you need to understand the humiliation. And to understand the humiliation, you need to understand who I was before any of this started, and the environment that shaped me. My name is Caroline. I'm 32 years old. I work as a logistics analyst at a distribution company in Atlanta, and I'm the kind of person who solves problems. At work, they call me when the client is difficult, when the deadline won't close, when the spreadsheet doesn't add up. I have real friends, Danielle, who's known me since high school, and a group of coworkers I laugh with more than anything else. I love watching bad reality TV with popcorn, Sunday lunch with the smell of onions frying, reading in silence on the back porch while the neighborhood is still asleep. I had a life, a good life, most days. My weight was always part of me, like my raspy morning voice, like my habit of reaching for something sweet after lunch, like my big looping handwriting. It was a characteristic, not a tragedy. At least that's how I tried to see it. The problem was my family, not all of them. There were exceptions. But the core of it, my mom Sandra and my sister Ashley, had a very specific relationship with my body, one that began before I was old enough to understand what was happening, and that took me years to be able to name. My mom is the kind of woman who genuinely believes that humiliating someone is the same as caring for them. She doesn't wake up in the morning thinking about how to hurt me. She wakes up thinking she's doing her job. That's what makes everything so much more complicated and so much more painful. Because when cruelty comes wrapped in love, you spend years not knowing whether what you're feeling is legitimate. From the time I was 12, meals at home had a soundtrack. Caroline, you've had enough today. Caroline, are you going to take more? Caroline, look at your sister Ashley. She eats everything and doesn't gain a pound. You should have inherited that. Ashley is 2 years younger than me. Tall, thin since childhood. The kind of daughter who appeared in family photos without anyone needing to reposition anything. She was never directly cruel to me when we were little. It was more subtle than that. It was the silence when my mom made a comment about my plate. It was the sideways glance I learned to recognize, the one that said I saw that, and I'm not going to do anything. At extended family gatherings, holidays at my grandmother's house in Marietta, where 3 generations would pile in, I developed the reflex of sitting with my back to the window, so the light wouldn't catch me from the side. I learned to eat slowly, as though eating little was a performance I needed to give. I learned to laugh at the comments before anyone noticed they had hurt me. Caroline's gotten big, hasn't she? Said in the same tone someone uses to comment on the weather. Caroline, have you seen a doctor lately? You should ask about that, said like advice, but with the sting of someone who wants you to feel like something is wrong with you. Caroline doesn't have a boyfriend because she doesn't take care of herself, said by my Aunt Deborah, confirmed by my mom's silence. I grew up inside a home where my body was a topic, where the way I took up space was commented on, analyzed, mourned, and where love never came without an implied condition. Ashley got engaged to Tyler when I was 29. Tyler is a civil engineer, works for a firm in Midtown, has the kind of smile that covers everything. They got engaged at a restaurant in Virginia Highland, posted it on Instagram, and within 48 hours, I'd already received messages from 4 different relatives asking when it would be my turn. My mom didn't ask when it would be my turn. My mom said, in the family group chat, "Now we just need Caroline to find someone. Tough one, but we're rooting for her." 15 people liked the message. I read it, put my phone down, went to the bathroom, sat on the edge of the tub for about 10 minutes, and then walked back out like nothing had happened. That's what I did. That's what I always did. The first signs that something wasn't right, not just in the environment around me, but inside my own body, I started noticing around age 26. I was getting tired in ways I shouldn't have been. I'd sleep 8 hours and wake up feeling like I'd slept 4. There were days when my body felt so heavy that the idea of climbing a flight of stairs seemed genuinely absurd. I went to the doctor, Dr. Gerald Patterson, general practitioner, office in Decatur. $280 a visit. He looked me over, ordered some labs, and when the results came back, he slid the papers toward me and said, "Everything's within normal range for someone at your weight. What you need is to move more and eat more mindfully." I asked about the fatigue. Fatigue is very common in sedentary people, Caroline. I asked whether there might be something making it harder to manage my weight, beyond behavior. He crossed his arms and said, "There's a very human tendency to look for an external cause for what is, most of the time, a matter of habits. You want an organic cause because it's more comfortable than examining your own choices." I paid $280 to hear that. I left the office, drove back to Decatur, walked into my mom's house, and that night was one of the worst I can remember. Not because the doctor had been cruel. Technically he wasn't, not really. It was because I believed him. Because I left there convinced the problem was me. That I was lazy, undisciplined, without willpower. That the exhaustion I felt was deserved. And that voice, Dr. Patterson's voice, started mixing with my mom's voice, with Ashley's voice, with the silence of the family group chat, until I couldn't separate anymore what was theirs and what was mine. Ashley's engagement lasted a year and 3 months. During that time, my body became a topic with a frequency I had never seen before, because now there was an event, a date, a formal occasion where I'd have to exist publicly alongside my family. The first time the bridesmaid dress came up, I was at my mom's house on a Friday evening. Ashley had brought catalogs. She opened one, slid her finger down the pages, and without looking at me said, "Caroline, you're going to need to get yours custom made, because the standard sizes aren't going to work for you." My mom nodded. Better that way anyway. More reliable. I didn't say anything. 2 months before the wedding, I went to a seamstress named Gloria who works out of her home studio in East Atlanta. I spent $360 on an emerald green dress, the shade Ashley had chosen. Gloria was kind. She measured everything carefully, asked me not to do any crash dieting before the final fitting because it throws off the fit. I liked her. The dress turned out beautiful. I looked at myself in the mirror at the last fitting and thought, "It's fine. This is going to be fine." It wasn't. The wedding was a Saturday in August. Piedmont Room in Buckhead. Capacity for 220. Every seat filled. I arrived at 5 o'clock to help with the final preparations. I did everything a sister of the bride does. Helped arrange the bridesmaid bouquets, confirmed the seating assignments, held Ashley's nerves in the back hallway while she waited to walk in. She was stunning. That's the truth. She was genuinely stunning, and I was happy for her. That's also the truth. The ceremony was beautiful. Dinner began. The family table filled up, wine was poured, and I gradually relaxed. My Aunt Ruth, my mom's sister, the only person in the entire family who had never once in her life made a comment about my body, was sitting next to me and made me laugh 3 times in a row with stories about a trip she'd just taken to Savannah. I thought, it'll pass. The night will pass, and it'll have been fine. Then the DJ turned the music down. Tyler took the microphone for the toast. It was lovely. It was moving. The room applauded. Then he handed the microphone to Ashley. She thanked his parents, thanked her friends, thanked my mom with a sentence so well-crafted that half the room got misty-eyed. And then she turned toward where I was sitting and said, with the smile of someone about to tell a funny story, "And this right here is my sister Caroline. She's one of a kind, y'all. Still living with our mom, still hasn't found anyone. And she's gotten pretty big, as you can all see." 1 second of pause. My mom, from the table next to ours, raised her glass and added loud enough for everyone to hear, "If anyone's brave enough to take her home tonight, just let us know." The nearest table erupted. The laughter spread. I heard at least 3 separate tables laughing at the same time. I went still. My face was on fire. That specific heat that climbs up your neck, burns through your ears, reaches your forehead, the heat of public shame, which is different from any other kind of heat. My hand was gripping the champagne flute with a force I wasn't controlling. I remembered absurdly that the emerald green dress had cost $360. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to be able to stand up from that chair, cross that polished marble ballroom without anyone seeing me, slip out through the side door and never come back. And then something happened that I did not expect. A man stood up, not from my table, from the table next to ours, where Tyler's friends were sitting, most of whom I barely knew. He didn't stand up slowly, didn't stand up with ceremony. He stood up the way someone stands up when they've made a decision. He was around 35, light blue button down, serious expression. He didn't have a microphone, but the room was quiet enough that everyone heard when he said, "Excuse me, what just happened was not funny." The silence that followed was different from the laughter silence. It was heavier. Ashley looked at him with an expression I had never seen on my sister's face. Genuine surprise, no script. The man continued, "I'm sorry to interrupt, but I can't sit here after that." And he sat down. He didn't say anything else. He didn't make a speech. He didn't look at me to see if I approved. The DJ started playing again. The night continued. Most people acted like nothing had happened, but something had happened. I just didn't know yet what it was. My Aunt Ruth reached under the table and squeezed my hand once, firmly. I didn't look at her. If I looked at her, I was going to cry, and I was not going to cry there. I went to the bathroom at 10 o'clock and stood in front of the mirror for about 4 minutes. I wasn't crying. I was trying to understand what I was feeling. It wasn't just embarrassment. It was something older, more tired. It was the accumulated weight of years of comments I had normalized, showing up all at once, that night, in front of 200 people. And for the first time in many years, alongside that weight, there was something else. There was anger. Not the anger that turned back against me, the anger that points outward. I went back to the table. I thanked Aunt Ruth with a look. I ate dessert. I left at 11:30, hugged Ashley on the way out because that was what you did, and heard my mom say, "Wasn't that just beautiful?" on the way to the parking garage like nothing had happened. In the Uber back to Decatur, in the back seat, with the window cracked and the August Saturday passing outside, I finally cried. I cried like someone releasing something they've been holding for a very long time. And in the middle of it, one sentence appeared in my head with a strange clarity. This cannot keep going. It wasn't about losing weight. It wasn't about proving anything to anyone. It was about a fundamental exhaustion of being treated, by my own family, like my body was a public problem anyone could comment on. I didn't know yet what I was going to do, but I knew something had changed. In me, definitively. That night was the before. The after was about to begin. In the days following the wedding, I did what I had always done. Went to work, answered my emails, drank my morning coffee looking out the kitchen window of my mom's house. But there was a difference I couldn't quite name. It was as if a layer of insulation had been removed, as if I were feeling things more directly, without the buffer I'd spent years building. My mom didn't mention what had happened at the wedding. Ashley sent a message Monday saying, "Thank you for everything," as if it had been a normal day. The family group chat went quiet for about 3 days and then picked right back up with its usual rhythm. Food photos, memes, good morning gifts, as if nothing had happened, except it had. The man from the table next to Tyler's was named Marcus, Dr. Marcus Ellison. I found that out weeks later, when Danielle, my friend from high school, who had been invited by Tyler through an old friendship, sent me a message asking if I knew who that guy was who said something at the wedding. I told her I didn't. She sent me a screenshot from the Instagram profile of someone she'd found through Tyler's account. Marcus Ellison, physician, endocrinologist and metabolic specialist according to his bio, worked at a practice in Virginia Highland. I looked at the photo for a moment. Then I closed my phone and didn't think about it again for about 2 weeks. What I did start thinking about, with increasing urgency, was my body. Not the way my family thought about it. The way you think about something when you realize it hasn't been working right, and you've spent a long time believing the fault was yours. The fatigue had gotten worse over the last few months. There were weeks when I'd get home from work and lie on the couch for an hour without being able to move. Not out of laziness, but out of an exhaustion that went beyond the physical. My cycle had been irregular for over a year. There were days when my concentration slipped so completely that I'd read the same email 4 times without retaining anything. I had normalized all of it, because Dr. Patterson had told me it was about habits, because my family had told me it was weakness, because I had spent so long internalizing those voices that they had become my own voice. But there was that new anger, and anger asks questions the old voice didn't allow. What if it wasn't weakness? What if something real was happening in my body that no one had bothered to investigate? I spent an entire weekend reading personal accounts, articles written in plain language, testimonials from women with symptoms similar to mine. And the more I read, the more one specific thing kept coming up. Women whose bodies didn't process energy the way they should, who felt exhausted no matter how much they moved or how carefully they ate, whose weight climbed or wouldn't budge regardless of what they tried. Women who had been told the same thing I was told: eat less, move more. Women who later found out there was a real cause, that their body had been running in a constant state of emergency, storing everything it could, spending less than it should, and that this wasn't character, wasn't discipline, wasn't willpower, it was physiology. It was a body functioning differently than expected, and needing specific help to change. The following Tuesday, I opened Google and searched for the practice listed in Dr. Marcus Ellison's Instagram profile. It was not a romantic act. It was an act of decision. I wasn't looking for the man who had stood up at the wedding. I was looking for a doctor who would be different from the last one, and the only reference I had for someone I knew, even indirectly, was him. I called the practice. The visit was $320. I booked it for the following week. I went alone. I didn't tell anyone, not even Danielle. I arrived 15 minutes early, sat in the waiting room, and stared out the window at a quiet street in Virginia Highland, with a mix of hope and the old familiar fear of being let down again. When the receptionist called my name and I walked into the office, Dr. Marcus was sitting at his desk writing something. He looked up, recognized me immediately, and there was a fraction of a second of surprise that he controlled well. He said, "Caroline, I'm glad you came." I sat down and said, "I came because I need a doctor who listens, not because of what you said at the wedding." He nodded. "Understood. Tell me what's going on." And I did. For the first time in years, I told all of it, without minimizing, without apologizing, without bracing for judgment. The fatigue, the irregular cycle, the difficulty concentrating, the weight that didn't respond to what I tried, the years with my previous doctor who sent me home with behavioral advice. He listened to all of it, without crossing his arms, without interrupting, taking notes. When I finished, he said, "What you're describing includes at least 3 things that deserve real clinical investigation. Not assumptions, investigation. I'm going to order a comprehensive panel. We're going to find out what's actually happening before drawing any conclusions." I swallowed. I wasn't used to that. "But do you suspect something specific?" I asked. "It could be more than one thing at once, but based on what you're telling me, I suspect your body is having difficulty processing energy efficiently, and that there's a cause we can identify and treat. What I'm not going to do is send you home with a conclusion before I have the data." I left with a lab order in my hand and something I hadn't expected. Relief. Not answers yet. The relief of having been taken seriously. I got the labs done within 2 days. I came back 2 weeks later for the results appointment. Dr. Marcus opened the folder with the labs, arranged the pages on the desk, and said, "Okay, I'm going to explain what we found in plain language, because that's what matters." What the results showed was this: my body, for a combination of reasons that included how my thyroid was functioning and how I was processing sugar, had been operating in a state of chronic overexertion. It was like the engine was always running in survival mode, storing energy instead of burning it, producing too much of certain things and not enough of others, with no way for me to know that through sheer willpower. "This is not a character flaw," he said. "This is your body asking for help in a way that your previous doctor wasn't able, or wasn't willing, to hear." I looked at him for about 3 seconds. "Did this exist before?" I asked. "Almost certainly yes. Given this combination of findings, I'm confident this has been present for at least 3 or 4 years. Possibly longer. 3 or 4 years. Possibly longer. 3 or 4 years in which I went to the doctor with these symptoms and was sent home with the conclusion that the problem was my behavior. 3 or 4 years in which I believed that conclusion, in which I let it become the voice that told me I was weak, that I had no discipline, that what my family said about me was correct." "And the previous doctor," I said slowly, "with the labs he ordered, could he have seen this?" Dr. Marcus chose his words carefully. "The labs he ordered didn't include the panel needed to identify this. Either he didn't suspect it, or he didn't prioritize investigating it." I nodded. I didn't say anything else for a moment. I was processing something that still didn't have a name. The irony was too perfect to be accidental. The doctor who sent me home with behavioral advice had never ordered the basic labs needed to understand what was actually happening. The family that had spent years commenting on my body had never once asked whether there might be a physiological reason it was the way it was. The entire environment that had judged me for years was judging something they didn't understand, and that I hadn't understood either. because no one had taken the time to investigate. Is there treatment? I asked. There is, and it works, but it's going to require follow-up, patience, and for you to stop blaming yourself for symptoms that were never your fault. That last sentence I needed to hear a few times in my head before I could hold what came with it. I left the practice that day with a feeling I couldn't quite describe. It wasn't happiness. Happiness would have been too simple. It was something more complex, more quiet. It was the feeling of finally having ground under my feet after years of trying to balance on a floor that wasn't there. I started the treatment Dr. Marcus recommended alongside a new registered dietitian, Nicole Hargrove, who works out of the same practice in Virginia Highland, and who was the first healthcare professional to ask me, in our first appointment, how I was feeling, not just what I was eating. The months that followed were different from anything I had experienced before. It was not magic. It was not linear. There were hard weeks, days when my body didn't cooperate, moments when patience was the only tool I had. But there was a fundamental difference. I was not doing this to prove anything to anyone anymore. I was doing it because my body needed it, and because I, for the first time, was on my own body's side. Nicole didn't hand me a list of restrictions. She asked what I enjoyed eating, what gave me pleasure, what made me feel heavy, what made me feel good. We built something together. It was a conversation, not a prescription. My relationship with food began to change in a way I didn't expect, not because I stopped eating things I loved, but because the guilt, little by little, started leaving the room. Friday night popcorn with Danielle kept happening. Sunday lunch with the smell of onions frying kept happening. What changed was what I felt while eating. Presence instead of anxiety. Pleasure instead of transaction. With treatment underway, the fatigue started improving. Not overnight. Gradually, organically. First the mornings, which became less heavy. Then concentration, which started working reliably again. Then sleep, which became more restorative. And my body responded. Slowly, but it did. The gym where I started going was in Kirkwood, near the apartment I'd begun looking for to rent, because one of the things I decided after the diagnosis was that it was time to create my own space. The membership was $260 a month. My trainer's name was Simone, 31 years old, specializing in functional training, with the specific quality of never comparing me to anyone and always asking how I was doing before we started. In our first session, she asked me what I wanted to feel, not what I wanted to look like, what I wanted to feel. I was quiet for a second. No one had ever asked me that before. I said, I want to feel like my body is mine, like it works for me. She nodded. That's what we're going to build. And we did. There were other people in the gym, bodies of every kind, at every stage. No one looked at me differently. No one commented on anything. It was what a fitness space should be, and what I had never experienced until then. The months kept moving, treatment advancing, my body responding, life, which had been suspended for too long, starting to move again. It was during that period, about 4 months after the wedding, that my Aunt Ruth called me on a Thursday night. Aunt Ruth is quiet by nature. She doesn't call to pass on gossip. When her number shows up, it's because she has something to say. I answered with the feeling that this was important. Caroline, she said, I need to tell you something. I've been carrying this for a while and I can't anymore. I asked her to go on. She took a deep breath. The comment Ashley made at the wedding. Into the microphone, I remember. That was planned, sweetheart. It wasn't spontaneous. I found out before the wedding. Your mom Sandra told your Aunt Deborah, who told me thinking I'd find it funny. They rehearsed it. Ashley was going to make the comment, and your mom would add to it. It was supposed to be a family joke. Silence. There's more, she said, with the kind of care someone uses when they know the next thing is going to hurt. In the message thread your mom has with her sisters, one I'm not in, but Deborah told me, they discussed before the wedding whether you'd be a bridesmaid or just a guest. Sandra said she was worried about how you'd look in the photos. I was sitting on the bed in the apartment I had just rented in Kirkwood. Moving boxes were still stacked in the corner of the room. The window was open, the street below making the normal sounds of a Thursday night. She said what? I asked, with a calm that surprised even me. That she was worried about how you'd look in the photos. I stayed quiet for a stretch that felt long to me and probably felt long to her too. Aunt Ruth, I finally said, do you have anything in writing? Anything Deborah sent you? A pause. I have a voice memo she sent me telling me the story, and a screenshot of part of the thread that she forwarded to me laughing, expecting me to agree. Can you send them to me? I was already waiting for you to ask. I received the files that night. I listened to the voice memo 3 times. I read the screenshot twice. My mom, in a text to her sisters 2 weeks before Ashley's wedding. Hopefully Caroline doesn't wear something that shows everything. I already asked Ashley to keep her away from the cameras in the group photos. The photographer's been told. The photographer's been told. I stared at that sentence for a while. I didn't cry. I didn't fill with the sharp anger I might have expected. What I felt was something much closer to understanding, to a piece sliding into place after a long time loose, because suddenly I understood the whole pattern, not just the microphone comment, not just the Sunday dinners, not just the messages in the family chat. I understood the logic organizing all of it, a logic that said my body was a problem to be managed, a source of shame to be minimized, a variable to be controlled. And I had spent years believing that logic was love. It wasn't. It was control. It was an inability to accept that I existed in a way they didn't approve of. And instead of working through that inability, they had turned my body into the problem. I texted Danielle, "I need to talk. Are you free tomorrow?" Over the following days, I started organizing what I had. Not obsessively, not from anger, methodically. The voice memo from Aunt Deborah's account of events, the screenshot of the thread, my own memories, which I spent one afternoon writing out in a document, with specific dates and details I had kept without knowing I was keeping them. The appointment with Dr. Patterson and what he said. The report from Dr. Marcus with the diagnosis and the estimate of how long that condition had existed without being treated. It wasn't hatred, it was organized memory. I wasn't forgetting, I was filing. Meanwhile, the people who had hurt me were noticing the change in a way I observed with a cool, steady attention. My mom was first. 3 months after the wedding, she called on a Saturday afternoon. "Caroline, you seem different, more energetic. Are you doing some kind of diet?" I told her I was taking care of my health. She said, "Well, good for you, sweetheart. I always knew you could do it when you put your mind to it. I always believed in you." I was quiet for 2 seconds. Then I told her I was doing well and ended the call. Ashley, who got back from her honeymoon in Hawaii after 2 weeks, sent a heart emoji in our text thread. It was the first contact since the wedding. I replied with a heart too, small, controlled. Dr. Patterson, I heard this through Danielle, who has a friend who goes to the same practice, received a formal complaint filed with the Georgia Composite Medical Board for inadequate clinical investigation. It wasn't from me. It was from another patient who'd been through something similar, but I found out, and it didn't surprise me. There was also Aunt Deborah, who suddenly started calling me gorgeous every time she saw me. The same Aunt Deborah who had laughed at my mom's message. I smiled back, with the surgical precision of someone who knows exactly what she's doing. And then, unexpectedly, there was Tamara. Tamara had been a client at a gym I had briefly attended 3 years earlier, a place I went for 4 months until I couldn't take the trainer's thinly veiled comments anymore. The trainer's name was Chad. Tamara had stayed longer, and when she found me on Instagram, because she saw a photo Danielle had posted of me, she reached out with a direct message. "Caroline, I don't know if you remember me, but we went to the same gym back in 2022. I've been researching body shaming in fitness spaces, and I started thinking about some of the things that trainer used to do. Did you ever file a complaint?" I hadn't, but Tamara had. We arranged to meet for coffee at a cafe in Inman Park on a Sunday morning, with the neighborhood still slow. She arrived with a folder. "I filed a complaint with the National Federation of Professional Trainers last year," she said, opening the folder on the table. "It's still being investigated. They're collecting more statements. If you have anything at all, it could be relevant." Inside the folder were screenshots of messages Chad had sent in side group chats with other trainers, comments about the bodies of specific clients, an informal spreadsheet he maintained with personal assessments of female clients, some with descriptions I don't need to repeat here, and statements from 3 other women who had been at the same gym. I looked through the materials carefully. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. She looked at me directly. "Because I saw what he did to you. That thing he did where he'd call you by name in front of everyone when someone else messed up. Like you were the example of what not to do. You didn't realize it, but I did." Silence. "I realized it," I said slowly. "I just chose not to name it at the time. Do you want to contribute a statement?" I thought for a moment. Then I said, "Yes." We gave our statements. The complaint moved forward. I'm not going to describe every step because it wasn't my central battle. It was a shared one, between several women who had passed through the same space and experienced the same kind of systematic humiliation. What I can say is that Chad's certification was suspended pending investigation, and that the screenshots circulated through trainer networks in the area with a speed that made clear there were more people who knew than anyone had assumed. But the confrontation I had been preparing wasn't with him. It was closer. It was a Sunday in October. The family had organized a dinner, one of those gatherings with a vague excuse, "We just miss everyone," that my mom puts together when she senses the group is drifting apart. I was invited. I said I'd be there, and I showed up, but differently from every other time I'd shown up. I arrived at noon at my mom's house in Decatur. The table was already being set. The smell of garlic and rice was familiar and good, and there were about 12 people scattered between the living room and the back porch. Ashley was there with Tyler. Aunt Deborah was there. Aunt Ruth, whom I had specifically asked to come, was in the corner of the kitchen, watching me when I walked in with the look of someone who knows what's about to happen. We ate. The meal went along with the usual normalcy. I ate, laughed in some conversations, observed. It was after dessert, when most people were still at the table with coffee, that I stood up. I wanted to take advantage of everyone being here to say something, I said. My mom looked at me with a mildly surprised expression. Go ahead, sweetheart. I didn't sit back down. I stayed standing, because I needed the posture that moment required. I'd like to talk about Ashley's wedding, about what happened with the microphone. The silence was immediate. Ashley turned toward me. Caroline, that was months ago. I know, I said, and I stayed quiet for months. But before I say anything, I want to ask you something, Ashley, in front of everyone. Was that comment spontaneous? She blinked. What? The comment into the microphone. This is my sister, still living with Mom. Hasn't found anyone. Gotten pretty big. Was it spontaneous? She looked at my mom. My mom looked at her. I watched that look. It was a joke, Ashley said. You know it was. I know it was rehearsed, I said. Planned between you and Mom, before the wedding. I know you practiced it. And I know the photographer was told to keep me out of the group photos. Complete silence. Aunt Deborah, across the table, was looking at her coffee. Where did you hear that? My mom said, in a tone that tried to sound indignant but came out merely controlled. It doesn't matter where. What matters is whether it's true. Pause. Caroline, my mom started. You're blowing this out of... I have the voice memo, I said simply. New silence. And I have the screenshot. I paused. Where you, Mom, wrote that you were worried about how I'd look in the photos, in your exact words. My mom had the expression of someone who had been genuinely caught off guard. Not someone unjustly accused, but someone who hadn't expected the evidence to exist. Ashley, I continued, turning to my sister, you rehearsed that comment. You took the microphone at your wedding and used it to humiliate me in front of 200 people on a day when I showed up in an evergreen dress that cost $360 that I bought because I wanted to look beautiful at your celebration. Ashley's eyes were wet. I don't know if it was shame or the kind of tears that come when you've been confronted. They look similar on the outside, very different on the inside. Caroline, I didn't mean to. You meant to, I said, not with excessive anger, with the calm of someone who had organized this moment for months. You meant to and you planned it. The question isn't the intention, it's that you did it. And Mom did it. And I stayed quiet because it was your wedding and I thought I should protect your day more than I should protect myself. The table was in complete silence. I didn't come here today to destroy anyone, I continued. I came because you're my family, and I needed to say this out loud, with everyone present, because what happened at that wedding was not a family joke. It was a planned humiliation, and you need to know that I know that. My mom tried one last maneuver. Caroline, you're being oversensitive. We've always joked like this. I looked at her for a second. Mom, I said with a voice I recognized as new, not the voice I used when I needed to protect myself, but the voice of someone who no longer needs to do that. You spent years using my body as a punchline. You told the photographer at my sister's wedding to keep me out of the group shots. That is not a joke, that is shame. And the shame was yours. It was never mine. I paused. I let the sentence settle. I didn't come here for an apology, because I don't know if you truly understand what you did, but I needed to say it, for me, so this could stop being something I carry alone. I sat down. Aunt Ruth, from the corner of the kitchen, had eyes that were shining. The dinner continued, or tried to, in that strange tension that follows a spoken truth. Some people left earlier than usual. Aunt Deborah didn't look me in the eye until she said goodbye. Tyler sat uncomfortable and spent more time on his phone than normal. Ashley found me in the hallway before she left. We stood facing each other for a moment. I didn't know it would hurt her that much, she said. But you knew it would hurt me, I replied. She didn't answer. You rehearsed that comment, Ashley. I know that. What I want you to know is that I rehearsed mine too. I just save it for when it's worth it. And today, it was worth it. She left without another word. The weeks that followed were quiet, the kind of quiet that comes after something real has been said. My mom didn't call for 15 days. When she did, it was to ask if I was doing okay, with a tone slightly different from usual, as if she still didn't know what to do with what had happened. I told her I was doing well, because I was. Tyler and Ashley separated 18 months after the wedding. I didn't learn the details. It wasn't my business. I heard Ashley had been staying at my mom's house for a while, and that it had been a hard stretch for her. One night in March, almost 2 years after the wedding, Ashley sent me a message. "Caroline, do you have a minute? I need to talk to someone." I held my phone for about 2 minutes. She was going through something hard. That was real. And she was coming to me because somewhere inside herself, she knew I was the person who showed up when things got serious. That had always been true. I typed and deleted 3 different responses. I sent the one I actually meant. "I'm well. I do have a minute. But before we talk, I need you to understand something. I show up out of love, not because I forgot. What you did to me at your wedding was real. And this conversation today is going to happen between 2 adults who respect each other, not between the sister you humiliated and the sister who needs support, okay?" She took about 8 minutes to respond. "Okay," she said. "Then call me." She called. I'm not going to share what was said in that call, because some things belong on the inside. What I can tell you is that it was the first real conversation Ashley and I had in maybe a decade, with discomfort, with long silences, with her tears and my quiet presence of someone who no longer needs approval in order to exist. It was not an instant reconciliation. That's not how it works. It was a first step on a long road that might lead somewhere different, or might not, but it was honest, and honest was what had been missing for a very long time. Now when I get up in the morning, I get up in my own apartment in Kirkwood, a small place with a view of a tree-lined street that I chose on purpose when I was looking. There's a plant on the windowsill that Danielle gave me when I moved in. There's a coffee maker I bought with my first paycheck after the promotion I received at the distribution company. I became logistics coordinator in October, 6 months after starting treatment and feeling my concentration come back for real. I look at myself in the mirror every day, not obsessively, presently. The body that's there is my body. It's the body that survived everything that was said about it. It's the body that keeps responding to the care it's finally receiving. It's the body that stood up in my mom's house on a Sunday in October and told the truth out loud for the first time. I didn't learn to love this body despite the people who tried to teach me shame about it. I learned to love it when I stopped seeing it through their eyes. That's the part no one tells you about transformation. It doesn't start at the gym. It starts the moment you decide that the story other people built about you is no longer required. And I want to speak to you directly about this, because it matters. Medical fat phobia is real, and it is serious. What I experienced with Dr. Patterson, being sent home with a behavioral conclusion without complete clinical investigation, happens to women every day. You have the right to demand that your symptoms be genuinely investigated. You have the right to change doctors when you don't feel heard. A doctor who arrives at a conclusion about your weight without ordering the appropriate labs is not practicing medicine. They are practicing assumption. And you are not obligated to pay for assumption. Family fat phobia comes disguised as love. I'm telling you because I care, and "you know I love you" are the phrases most commonly used to justify comments that cause real harm. Genuine concern for your health does not look like public humiliation. Genuine concern for your health looks like, "How are you feeling? Have you been to the doctor? Do you need anything?" When concern for your health shows up as commentary about your body's appearance in public spaces, it is not concern. It is control. You can love your family and at the same time establish that your body is not an open subject for their commentary. Internalized fat phobia happens when the voice that hurts you starts sounding like your own voice. When you look in the mirror and what you hear is your mom, your doctor, your trainer, but you think you're thinking for yourself. Identifying that is one of the most difficult and most liberating processes there is. Psychological support specialized in body image and your relationship with food exists. It works. And it is not weakness, it is emotional intelligence. If you are living what I lived, seeking professional support may be the most courageous thing you do this year. If I had understood any of this earlier, I would have protected myself so much sooner. I wouldn't have believed for so long that the problem was me. And if you are living what I lived, I want you to know, you are not wrong. The problem was never your body. The problem was who was around you and what they taught you to believe about yourself. Thank you for staying here with me all the way to the end. This story wasn't easy to tell, but it was necessary. If something in what you heard touched you, share it with someone who needs to know she is not alone. And tell me in the comments, what was the moment when you stopped apologizing for existing the way you are? It can be a sentence, it can be a paragraph, it can be a date. I want to read it. Your story matters just as much as mine, and the fact that you made it here tells me you're in some kind of process of recognizing yourself too. I'm rooting for you. With everything.